Hi there, it's Mike and Rich from Drumhead again, and today we're just going to have a bit of a conversation about practicing and some tips as to how you can hopefully improve your practice to improve your playing as quickly as possible, really, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, practice is something that I talk about a lot with my students, and it's a skill in itself because people don't do it correctly. They don't realise that what you're practicing in your practice room doesn't need to sound good the first time you play it. Yeah, we hear things and practice videos and we see things and it's like everything's absolutely perfect. That's not the point of practice. The point of practice is that you iron out the things that you can't do and not just practice things that you can do. Yeah, which is a really common thing. I'll say to people, what have you been working on in the week or 2 weeks since I've last seen you when they come into my teaching room? And it'd be, oh, well, I did this and I played along to this and I played along to that and I did this. It's like, okay, but what have you practiced? Because all you've done is play some songs that you already know how to play.
Yeah, what have you learned? Yeah, rather than just, absolutely.
So it's a conscious thing that you have to get better at practicing.
Yeah, and also the other thing is that don't expect to do everything at 100 miles an hour straight away. Yeah. It's something that I find all the time. As soon when you're teaching people, you teach them something and it has to be up to 100 miles an hour within 10 minutes. And it's just like, but that sounds not very good.
Yeah, that's it.
And it's like, but then they play it really slowly and you're like, just do it, and it's like, they're like, oh, this is boring. It's like, unfortunately, and the problem with practicing is that I've found myself over the years, which is why I've never done it as much as I should have done. I openly admit it, I could be 10 times as good as I was if I'd have really practiced as a young kid, because it's when you're young that you soak it up and you learn really quickly. But I get bored easily. And the problem is, if you're going to practice, it's not going to be interesting all the time. Yeah. In fact, I would say as a drummer, it's not going to be interesting 80% of the time. The way I find it becoming interesting is when I start to get good at what I'm practicing. Yeah. Like on the pad, I used to hate practice pads until I got to the point where I could do things on them, like paradiddles and various other rudiments at good speed. And suddenly it was like,
that's it.
I enjoy doing this now. But to get to that point, you've got to work hard. And it's the same as anything in life. And I sound like an old git now, but it's like you've got to work hard to get what you want. But unfortunately, it's true. Yeah. You've got to enjoy it as well. With me, maybe it's a case of sitting in a practice pad for 10, 15, 20 minutes or whatever. But then I go back to the kit and play on that for a while because that's what I love doing, and then maybe come back to the pad. Yeah. So it's and everyone has their own way of practicing, don't they? Yeah. You can suggest loads of different ways, but you've got to find something that's good for you.
That's it. It's got to, you're absolutely right in what you're saying there, but what we've got to do is we've got to kind of pick a goal and go, right, okay, at the end of my practice today, I want to be able to do this. Yeah. That could be playing the fill that you've just learned 10 beats a minute faster than you played it before. Yeah. It could be playing your paradiddles, it could be working on your hand speed, it could be getting your double strokes, it could be anything to a certain point. Yeah. So what I would say to you is practice for results, not time.
Okay. Yeah.
Because if we go, I'm going to practice for an hour, well, what are you going to do for an hour? If you achieve that 10 beats a minute in double strokes, if that's what you're working on, in 15 minutes, then go do something else for 45 minutes. Yeah. Because what you tend to do is then, if you achieve it, you think, oh, I've got another 45 minutes to do. Then you'll just start playing along, paying no attention to it.
Okay, yeah.
And you'll potentially then start to practice bad habits because you're just trying to kill time. That way, then you may as well not practice in the first place because you're just instilling bad habits. Yeah. So we always try and practice for time. Sorry, practice for results and not time.
Rather than time.
Yeah. So it gives you that. Okay, well, I've got to work on this. Okay, great. If that takes me 5 minutes, fine. If it takes me an hour and a half, then it takes me an hour and a half. Yeah. And that's how you structure your practice. And then what we need to really do is record what we're doing. So I don't mean record when you can film it and record it and do whatever you want to do, but get a book and go, right, okay, I'm working on a hand speed exercise. Brilliant. Well, I did it yesterday. Write the date down. Write the speed that you got it to the last time you did it. You can look at it and go, right, okay, well, I got this to 100 beats a minute last time. Brilliant. Today's date, I got it to 105 beats a minute. And you can see progression. So each page is a different exercise.
But along with that, I think it's worth saying you've got to be honest with yourself as
Yes.
well. And that's why when you say record it in two different ways, because everybody, pretty much everybody now has got some sort of recording device, i.e. your phone. You know, and when you are on your practice pad, you know, just put your phone. You don't even have to record the video. Just record the audio side of things. But when you think you've achieved 100 BPM with the paradiddle, whatever, then play it, maybe with a metronome, and listen back to it and see if you've actually got there. Because that, you know, it's very common. People come in and say, "Yeah, I can do it. Okay, I've got 250 beats per minute." And it's just a mess. You know, so be honest. Be honest with yourself
all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I did it a few years ago. Just a little sort of off-topic story. I did a clinic a few years ago, and I had this fill that I played. And unbeknown to me, the guys who were running the clinic had some cameras set up at the back of the audience, and they filmed it and put it on YouTube. And I watched that back, waiting for this fill, this epic fill that everybody's going to go, yes, that's the best fill I've ever heard. It was utterly terrible, and I have never ever played it since. And I would never know that if I hadn't watched myself playing it back. It was absolutely terrible. It wasn't in time. There were way too many notes in it based on the music I was playing. It was just a look at me, I can do this fill. Not musical. Oh, I've never played it ever since, and that was I think that was about 2012.
It's scarred.
Yeah, I sat and looked at it, and it was like no, and I would never know if I hadn't or somebody hadn't filmed that and sent it to me.
But just on a similar note, and this is from a band point of view, what you also tend to get is bands, you know, when they're younger, well, when they're older as well, you go into a rehearsal room situation where the sound's clattery, you've got loads of noise everywhere, you're working on tracks, you're playing it, you've got it all down. You're ready to go in the studio, sorted. And then you go in the studio and record, where it's basically like a microscope with all the microphones hearing everything you do. And suddenly you realise you're absolutely nowhere near. And the amount of bands that I've recorded who think they're absolutely on it, they come in to record, and even sometimes they kind of say, "Oh, that sounds terrible. I must have played it wrong." And you have to say sometimes, "Well, no, you probably played it the way you played it in the rehearsal room, but now it's a different scenario." So if you can, if you can avoid that by trying to practice, in your own time on pads or whatever. And get your accuracy. It's about accuracy, isn't it? Accuracy
definitely.
and feel with the playing, and getting both of those in place.
But it happens to all of us.
Of course,
You
absolutely.
know, we all play at certain times and go.
It still does. Recording our last album, or the one before we were doing the end of this song, which was quite a complex drum part. We jammed it together, and it sounded great. We came to record it, and suddenly you're looking at the waveforms, listening back to it. I'm thinking, Jesus, I'm rubbish.
What is that?
I'm absolutely rubbish. It sounded fine before. It must be your fault, Steve. Obviously the bass player.
That's it. But, you do it, if people walk, I have students from literally all over the place coming for lessons, but if you walk past my room when I was in the building by myself practicing, you'd go, who's that? Who's that 9-year-old playing drums in there? Because that's what it should be. I'm trying to push the boundaries and trying to play things and push my body to the point where it's not really wanting to go to make the other stuff easier. And I will do that all the time. I will play, strange things over the top of a samba, but I'll write down the tempo that I got it to, or I'll write down what I felt when I did that. So then I can look at it and I've got a record of it. It's that practice log. And then, as we've said before, lots of times, if you write something down, it's out of your head, so it frees up space in your head, and two, it kind of becomes true. So if you look at an exercise over the course of 2 months with the dates in it, and you're going, oh, okay, wow, I've got 40 beats a minute over 2 months. Now you can actually see progression. As opposed to starting to play today and going, well, that feels all right. Do it again tomorrow without the reference of a click or knowing where you were yesterday or the day before. How do you know you're getting any better?
And that works really, really well for when you get into a situation where you feel like you're stuck. Which was me again as a teenager learning to play paradiddles and doubles. sitting there trying to practice and just thinking, this is never getting better. So I stopped for 10 years. Didn't play a double stroke for about 10 years. Well, probably bits and pieces, but because I just couldn't see any improvements. And when you're too close to something, you don't. It's like when you see your friends when they have a baby, and you see it in 3 weeks' time, you're like, wow, it's massive, and they're going, oh, has it really grown? You don't. Things work differently, and you've got to be able to appreciate that the time you're putting in is creating results and positive results, and I think then you'll hopefully build on that. But I find, still to this day, I find practicing, I have to say, shouldn't say it, but I find it quite dull. I prefer to be out there playing, doing the band thing. But I know, because I teach now, in fact, teaching pushes me into practicing. Definitely.
Teaching makes you a better player, because you've got to understand what you're playing enough to be able to break that down and explain it to somebody else. Yeah. So you've got to be on top of it. And then if that student comes in and all of a sudden does this thing and they can do it better than you, it's like, well, how are you going to inspire them anymore? So you've always got to keep pushing yourself to be ahead of anybody that walks through the door. Now, if you're only teaching beginners and intermediate people, you're probably going to be fine. But in my case, anybody could walk through the door who's been playing drums in a kind of top 40 band for 20 years. That's anybody can walk in, and I've got to be at that level where I can deliver some value to them.
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing I love about it, sometimes when you're teaching, and you're teaching these ideas and something just springs to your mind, you try it, that you've never tried before, even when you're teaching. And the amount of times I've said to my students, bloody hell, I've never done that before. I'm having that.
No, you're right. You're right.
I'm going to use that next, because you're always learning, and that's the thing, that's another point, that you are always learning. I think I saw somebody, I don't know if it was Joe Morello or somebody, I can't remember who it was, saying that that at 80 years old, you should always still be learning. You'll never know it all.
Yeah. Never know it all. It's right. And back to the honesty thing. You've got to be honest. If you're playing something, and you repeatedly do something that doesn't work, then in your practice, have a list of things that are things that need your attention. Otherwise, that issue is going to be there forever. And a lot of the time, it isn't about the actual thing you're playing. It might be the way that you're playing it. The hand technique, the foot technique, or the speed of it, or something. But be honest with yourself. If you can't do it, have that page in that book in your practice log that goes, right, okay, these are things that I need to sort of pay attention to. Yeah. And then you're almost then making your own practice schedule.
You are.
Because that list of weaknesses that you have, that list of issues that you have that you come up against when you're practicing, become that list of what's next on the agenda to practice.
And work on your weaknesses. Yes. That's the key to it, rather than what I did, again as a teenager, learned to play the drums, I didn't. I got to the things that were my weaknesses and I just ignored them. And then I found years and years later, even when we were 3 or 4 albums in with Embrace, there was a lot of stuff that I just couldn't do. And I suddenly went back, and it was just like, why didn't I spend 10 minutes of time? It's not as though we're saying, practice 5 hours a day. 5 or 10 minutes on a practice pad a day. If one of my students does that and then comes back in 2 weeks later, even if they've done 10 minutes every other day or something, or every third day, sometimes they'll play something, I'll say, you've done some practice. They'll say, well, not much, how do you know? I say, because you've done some practice. That's anything you do, as long as you do it right, will help you improve.
The honesty, just sort of finishing off on the honesty thing, it still amazes me when I can say to people, what have you been working on, when they walk in the door for their lesson, and they'll tell me, and then they'll play it, and it's exactly the same as it was a couple of weeks ago. It's like, but you haven't worked on it. Because if you had worked on it, it wouldn't be worse than it was 2 weeks ago. Honesty is the key to this. You're only kidding yourself. If I think that, I don't know, like Mike said, Mike knows that his doubles are not, or have not been historically strong.
Still aren't.
But he doesn't go, oh, I'm the best at doubles, here we go, and plays doubles all the place, because he knows they're going to be a mess. Same with me, there's certain things that I've tried to play over years and gone, okay, I don't really like that.
That fill that you mentioned.
Yeah, that fill. Yeah, the fill's, it's a great fill if you're a drummer, but nobody wants to listen to it. And that's it, honesty. You're only kidding yourself. If you break down those barriers and really kind of analyse the way you're playing, you'll tend to find that you'll actually move forward really, really quickly by recording it, by logging it down in a book, by writing down your weaknesses and then working on those. Yeah, and then by working and practicing for results and not time. They're the things that are going to really help you to move forward.
Some good points there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
great.
just give it a try, guys, and see how you get on with it, and just try and make your practice fun.
Yeah. Great stuff. Right. We'll see you next time on Drop Med.
Cheers.
Bye.